We are just starting the second conversation after some technical issues that we have had that we won't mention, and we are discussing the topic and also the point of overlapping that I think are really wide between classical homeopathy and Syntropy. And I think we can start talking a little bit about one thing that I would be very interested to ask you, because it will be the next step. I mean, how to, experimentally speaking, homeopathy and Syntropy could find out a common field of exploration in an experimental way. I always had the impression that what we all know as the scientific common mainstream methodology is not enough for homeopathy. There are too many parameters that cannot be put in the proper focus, and so all this different approach from the scientific background, the scientific community that tries to explain homeopathy seems to constantly fail, including this last very interesting water memory theory. Yes. That in fact lasted longer, but it has been apparently gone away as well as the others. So I'm very curious to know what is proposed from Syntropy. Let's say, if there is an outlet to that problem.
Well, I had my intuition about Syntropy when I was 18, and instead of enrolling in physics or mathematics, which would have been my natural fields, I decided to enroll in psychology. But I was very disappointed, because the way how research was conducted in the field of psychology avoided any use of qualitative and subjective information. And research was conducted using techniques which required quantitative and objective information, and that was very difficult to obtain with humans. And so a lot of the experimental research which is done in psychology is done in the laboratories with animals, with rats. And I really couldn't accept that, because it is so far away from the ideas I was working on. And I started looking for different techniques. And when I finished experimental psychology, I chose the master in experimental psychology. I enrolled in a PhD in statistics. And what I discovered is that there are techniques which are suited for the entropical approach, and techniques which are suited for the syntropical approach.
Entropical would be the mainstream one.
Yes, where causality is a forward.
Yeah,
causality,
the common mainstream.
Yes. And my thesis, my PhD thesis, was in dividing these two type of techniques and methodologies. And basically what comes out is that there are two basic methodologies. One is based on the study of differences, and that is at the basis of the experimental method. You have the control group and the experimental group. And you can study differences, like differences in the mean values or in the variances of the groups. And so you have techniques that work on variances, analysis, or the analysis of differences in the mean values. And these techniques require quantitative and objective information, because differences can be calculated only if you have a quantitative information. On the other side, there is a methodology which is named the methodologies of concomitant variations, which was formulated in 1863 by Stuart Mill,
Which was also a philosopher.
He was an economist, a philosopher, a scientist, methodologist.
Yeah.
At those times, you could be a bit everything all together.
Yeah.
And well, in the field of statistics, there are many techniques which follow this other methodology. And so I started studying these techniques and developing software that allowed to use these techniques and this methodology, because the problem is that the software which is available is built in the thinking in the classical way, in the mainstream way. So it's very difficult to do research work using the methodology of concomitant variations if you don't have a software that you can use. I've been working as a programmer, and I developed my own software which is available free on the web.
What's your website?
It's www.syntropy.org.
How would you spell Syntropy?
Syntropy is SYNTROP with a Y at the end.
There's an H also, right?
No H.
No H. Okay.
And
.org. It's a .org.
.org.
Okay.
And it is possible to download papers on this topic, also on homeopathy from the syntropic point of view. We have a free access journal that is available. So my interest was that of developing the techniques which allowed to use the scientific approach in the field of syntropy, and which could be used also in the field of homeopathy. Because
you mean the same software?
The same software, the same approach.
Yeah.
Because the big problem with homeopathy is that if you use the classical methodology, which is based on the study of differences, you're not able to prove the validity of this approach.
There's too many parameters in homeopathy, too many things that you have to include in the picture, too many variables.
And also you use a lot of qualitative and subjective information. So the classical approach can handle only a limited number of variables, and they need to be quantitative and objective. When you work instead handling subjective and qualitative techniques, you need a totally different methodology. And I developed that because it was necessary in my field with syntropy to have these techniques. But it can be applied in any other field, like in economics, in homeopathy, in whichever field you're starting to consider that causality could be could work in a different way, not in a classical causality, but in a supercausal way, where there is causality and retrocausality.
I would call integrated causality somehow.
Maybe integrated causality. Yes.
Yeah.
So that has been my interest for many years.
Yeah.
And it's only recently that the picture is complete. The methodology and also all the theory of syntropy is now solid. It's based on something that I find can be discussed with others. And I'm now interested to work with people from different fields and try to see how it can be applied.
My field has always been that even, I have to make a premise here. I was never specially interested in what the scientific community, just because I don't have a background in science, I'm not specially stimulated by science, but that's only my story. But I always had the impression that there was a real, there were real big difficulties that were encountered by all those in the scientific community that were trying to make their best to explain homeopathy according to the old system of let's say, scientific observation. But just instinctively, I had this feeling. Just because there are too many complex informations that have to be dealt with, that the ordinary scientific method cannot offer, simply.
Yes.
It's just the way it is, the way it is built, that it is too flat somehow. So I'm very happy that there is already a possible tool. Of course, it requires a complete shift in the approach, but it's already there.
What I find interesting is that the mainstream field doesn't reject this tool.
Mm-hmm.
It is accepted. It is scientific.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that very few people use it. A bit because the classical approach based on the study of differences is very simple to use.
Yeah.
It could be used without computers, and that is the reason why it has developed so much. Now this new approach is it's available thanks to the new technology, but it is very difficult to inform people about it and to start doing experiments and studies in this new way.
Do you think, do you see already a protocol that can be, let's say, used by a classical homeopath that, or let's say, could you see already which would be the most suitable parameters that
Well, in order to get good results,
yeah,
it's important to get good data in the analysis.
Yeah.
And to have good data, you need to have a good theory.
Yeah.
So you can put whatever in the study, objective, subjective information. There is no limit in the amount of variables. But if you I would suspect, I'm using this word at the moment, it's just very premature kind of talk, but I would suspect that there will be an amazing majority of subjective informations yes.
for an interesting homeopathic outlet to the experiment rather than objective ones.
Yes.
Because in homeopathy, what makes the whole world upside down, so to speak, in the scientific traditional approach is that there are such an amount of qualitative subjective information.
Yes.
And that's why I'm saying upside down, because generally is the objective ones that, like the name of the disease, that is used in the mainstream approach.
Yes.
But in homeopathy's upside down is whatever is totally subjective and tiny, with even the tiniest differentiations on subjectivity that makes the quality
yes.
appearing.
Yes.
The quality also for the for choosing the right medicine that is required in the case.
Yes.
So you can imagine, no?
Well, I think we should experiment a little and see what comes out.
Yeah.
I've been experimenting a lot. In my field, I've done a lot of research in the social field, applying this methodology, and people were not aware that I was applying using a different methodology.
Okay.
And results were always very, very interesting. And so going back to the protocol, I think that you can get data in different ways, like interviews, questionnaires, or data forms. What it is very important is that you collect information that is meaningful in order to get meaningful results. What I find always interesting is that you start with a theory, with a hypothesis. You expect to see something and not other kind of relations between variables, but often you find so many other results that you were not expecting. And so what happens is that you do a research work and it opens the doors for many other investigations. And so it's a very creative
Sounds
approach.
very creative, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Excellent. So this time we just talked much more scientifically than usual, somehow, or we filled up with scientific words. This time we had this for this video. So I hope people could be happy as well, as they already showed they were happy about these talks. And we can finish here and see if we want to go further or not,
yes.
and that's it. Thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you.